Welcome everyone to Monday Match Analysis. It's a sprint to the French Open at this point. Second to last major tournament. It's Madrid this week. The tennis is already underway. Rome is kind of stacked. They're kind of stacked right on top of each other, so that's next week. But let's get into this Madrid draw. Again, some of the tennis has already been played, but no real massive shakeups yet. So that's kind of good for the sake of this show at least. I also will read your comments at the end. There are some interesting evergreen comments. Roger Federer is back on the clay, so we'll get into that a little bit later. I will go kind of the traditional quarter by quarter breakdown of the Madrid draw. But first, I'd like to talk about tennis politics just briefly because, in all honesty, I think it's tiresome. I think sometimes the tennis is exciting enough, and there's no need to get into the drama behind the scenes for my purposes. And I'm not knocking any of the great journalists that cover this sport and want to get deep into the weeds with politics. Personally, I consume all of it. I'm interested in it. But for my purposes, I don't have sources. I'm not a New York Times journalist like Christopher Clary, or I'm not a John Wertheim. I don't write for Sports Illustrated and, do journalism for 60 Minutes. For my purposes, I like to stay away from it. But there's one thing I feel kind of strongly about to the extent that I'd like to talk about it today. And that is the notion of second chances. Justin Gimelstob was a member of a very exclusive club, the ATP board. And he was found guilty of assaulting his former friend in a violent attack. There were some character questions in the past. He's made what I feel comfortably classifying as objectively sexist comments in the past. And this was kind of the straw that broke the camel's back. I would say even worse than making a sexist comment would be physically assaulting someone. Not that we need to compare these things, but Gimelstob was under a lot of public pressure. The ATP board was under a lot of public pressure, and Justin finally resigned. So Djokovic has come out with statements. Federer has been asked about it. Nadal has been asked about it. I want to read Djokovic's statement, and then I'll read Federer's statement for the sake of balance. Djokovic said, under the circumstances, it was a wise decision from his side, and it's been a very hot topic in the last period, and it's unfortunate because I think he's probably been the biggest asset that the players have had in the last 10 plus years that he's been on the tour representing players. But at the same time, these are kind of unfortunate circumstances, and he needs to go back and deal with that. Deal with that case and try to find the right balance and the right state of mind before he eventually tries to come back. The last sentence from Djokovic had people raising their eyebrows. What do you mean eventually tries to come back? Why even talk about him coming back? Why does tennis need Justin Gimelstob? It's impossible that they do need Justin Gimelstob. There are too many very qualified ambassadors of this sport on this planet for tennis to need one man. He is simply not that instrumental. He simply doesn't matter that much. So my eyebrows were kind of raised as well from this. Why talk about him coming back? Why? Let's talk about second chances before I read Federer's statement. Second chances are very important. Everyone has the right, should have the right, to rectify, with very few exceptions, to rectify their mistakes in life. However, we live in a world where there are some very, very exclusive positions, and it is not a right to be in these positions. It is an honor and a privilege to be in these positions. And guess what? All of these positions have more qualified candidates than there are spots to fill. The United States Supreme Court is an example. I don't need to get political, but powerful political positions, any powerful political position, is an example, not a right, to occupy these positions. A very special privilege. There are people who will be just as effective as Justin Gimelstob, just as knowledgeable, just as well versed, just as energetic, without these character issues. So, to open up the discussion for him to come back, I do not agree with. And I don't know why it's so hard for a lot of people in the tennis community to brush him aside. I don't want to pick on Djokovic. This is a lot of people who seem to be walking on eggshells. Federer said it's definitely the right move by Justin. He needs to go back and figure things out. There's no doubt about that. The tour needs to keep moving forward. It's challenging and important times right now. I was speaking to some of the players on the council to get a feel where they were standing when everything was brewing, and I'm happy this decision was taken by Justin, and now we can move forward and learn from what happened. So Federer not really opening up kind of discussions of him coming back, not necessarily coming down hard on him, but kind of going somewhere in the middle. Should I say a little bit Swiss of Roger Federer, a little bit neutral. So I just wanted to read his comment. I don't really have much to say, but I wanted for evenness. I didn't want to just read Djokovic's and pick it apart. I wanted to read both statements, just for fairness. But that's my main thing is I hate it when second chances are brought up in the context of such privileged positions. Who needs second chances? Why are second chances even ever discussed when it comes to these positions? These positions aren't... There are people who are just as qualified who don't need a second chance because they didn't blow their first chance. And that's the big point here that I want to make. Let's move on. Madrid draw. Novak Djokovic's quarter, he is the number 1 seed. Clay court season hasn't went as he would have hoped so far. In his quarter, Del Potro, Cilic, and Cecchinato. So all, I would say, very aggressive clay court players. Del Potro is back from injury. Great to see him back on court. Marin Cilic struggling. I know he's in a third set right now, but he did pick up a big win against Martin Klizan, who can be pretty tricky on clay. So nice to see Marin Cilic and his losing streak. And Marco Cecchinato, he's really dangerous, but he lost to my dark horse already, Diego Schwartzman. I would say that this is a nice quarter for Djokovic. One, because his highest seed, Del Potro, is coming back from injury and probably isn't ready to be at his highest level. But also because of the play styles here. We have all aggressive players. And again, the players who have challenged Djokovic have been the players who have been able to challenge him physically. The players who have remained consistent and made Djokovic force the issue. And if Djokovic wasn't going to force the issue, well then it was going to become a really, really long, grueling physical match. Those are the players who have challenged Djokovic. The players who have matched his consistency. And all these players are more aggressive players where Djokovic will probably be able to, I would say, win with his defense and his consistency. And have the advantage in his consistency. So I think a good quarter for Djokovic, and I think he comes through it. Upset alert, I wasn't feeling too strongly about this, but I put Cilic on upset alert just because of his recent form. And it looks like he was able to avoid a round 1 upset, but round 2 is kind of in question here. Early popcorn, Cecchinato and Schwartzman, that match happened, and I only watched small portions of it, but seemed pretty good. It was a 3-setter. Diego Schwartzman won the 3rd set pretty handedly. Under Novak Djokovic's quarter, in Novak Djokovic's half, is the number 4 seed, Roger Federer. In his quarter is Dominic Thiem, Fabio Fognini, and Gael Monfils. Tough for Federer. Dominic Thiem, as the number 5 seed, is the landmine that nobody wants to step on. I kind of hope, as things stand, for the sake of the French, and I haven't done the math, but it would be a lot more fair if Dominic Thiem gets into the top 4 and somehow overtakes Sasha Zverev. And I know Zverev has points to defend, and plenty of them, here in Madrid and Rome. So I haven't done the math, but Zverev as a top 4 seed is pretty much, I'll go as far as to say it's inaccurate at this time, because Dominic Thiem really deserves his quarter. Because he doesn't get his own quarter, he's the landmine that no one wants to step on. He's the seed that none of the top 4 will want in their quarter. In this case, Federer draws him, and of course Dominic Thiem beat him earlier this year in Indian Wells on a hard court. Fognini was able to avoid a letdown against Kyle Edmund, and it looks like he was really locked in and played a really good match. And then Gael Monfils back from injury, so we'll see if he can pick up where he left off, where he looked so strong post-Australian Open. But before the Sunshine Double, after the Australian Open, Monfils really hit his stride there. We'll see if he can get back. Hopefully he can by the time French Open comes around, because he's very good for that tournament when he's playing well. I had to think pretty hard about Federer or Thiem out of this quarter. I really did, because I think the Madrid conditions are very, very nice for Roger Federer. But I feel like Thiem, in the form that he's in, can have a pretty good edge in belief. And I also feel like Roger Federer is loose here and doesn't have a lot of pressure on himself. He's extremely dangerous in that mindset. So I wouldn't be surprised at all if Federer plays really well here in Madrid and goes on a run, perhaps beats Dominic Thiem. The thing is, I would say Dominic Thiem is the player to beat right now in this tournament. And I feel like if Federer shows any signs of kind of, first of all, not being able to draw belief from anywhere, because he already lost to Thiem and he's not, this is his first time getting match play on clay. So I worry about him in the big moments. I feel like Thiem would have more belief. And the pattern with Federer is not that he's not right there, but that he is struggling in the big points. The counter to that would be, well, that's when he puts pressure on himself and he has no pressure. So we'll see how Federer plays once he faces really important points. Is he at the point where he's taken so much pressure off himself that he's going to start playing big points better than we've seen in recent past? Dark horse, I had Kyle Edmund and Fabio Fognini. That Fognini-Edmund round 1 matchup, I had my eyes on, just because this is a clay court that rewards big hitting and aggression, and Edmund has the forehand, and you wonder about Fognini's ability to rebound mentally, keep his focus after his tremendous Monte Carlo tournament. So a huge win for Fabio Fognini, continuing to, well, not continuing, because he still has work to do to show that that wasn't just a big week for him. Because remember, it's not like he has had an incredible 2019. No, he just had a good week. He really just had one good week. But so far, so good for Fognini, showing that he is going to be able to take that and use it as momentum and make sure it's not just a blip. So big win for him over Edmund. Before I go on, I've realized that I've started this draw preview without talking about the conditions in Madrid. The stadiums are very, very covered, sort of. So I would say it's not very outdoorsy. You don't get swirling wind. I think you get really nice indoor-like conditions. That's one factor. 2 is the high altitude, so the ball flies through the air faster. But 3, something that people don't talk about with altitude, what about cardio? I mean, this is a major thing in a lot of sports. I know like in Denver, Colorado, the Broncos, people will go to play the Broncos in football, in American football, and they're at elevation. The defense will get tired. I've seen fights in UFC fights in Mexico City, and fighters will be exhausted. Like in every sport, that cardio is a factor. When it's played at altitude, it's pretty much all anyone can ever talk about. But for some reason in tennis, I feel like not enough attention is put on the effects that altitude in Madrid can have on cardio. So I don't think Madrid is anything like the French Open. I think it's close to indoor clay court. It's a faster surface, and it's harder to breathe there as well. All that to say, aggression is rewarded more. And I know I'm simplifying it, but I think that that's a fair kind of sweeping generalization about Madrid. Compared to other clay courts, aggression will be rewarded more in Madrid. So that's nice for Federer also. It's also nice for Dominic Thiem, who can play just as aggressive. But sometimes the speed is not good for Thiem when, on the return, which is maybe still the weakest part of Dominic Thiem's game, is his return. And that's what's kind of improved, I think, a lot recently this season. I think his return's a lot better. But still, when you rush Dominic Thiem, he's not the same heavy hitter. So it's interesting. And that's a tough call, in my opinion. Thiem or Federer out of that quarter, I think Federer could surprise people. But you favor Dominic Thiem anyways. Sasha Zverev's quarter. Zverev, Tsitsipas, Khachanov, and Coric. Stefanos Tsitsipas is coming off of a title week in Barcelona, which doesn't make me more apt to pick him. In fact, I think that Tsitsipas has struggled with fatigue in the early stages of his career. He was playing too much. I think he still kind of plays too much, and he should play less. But it was just 1 week. He got some rest. He hasn't done a whole ton of winning recently, so this was the first time he really went deep in quite a bit of time, his run in Barcelona. So I'm counting on him I think he'll have enough juice. If you look at this quarter, there aren't a lot of reliable options here. I mean, this is the weakest quarter in the tournament. It's really a quarter ruled by the next gen. You have Zverev, Tsitsipas, Khachanov, and Coric. Big win for Khachanov in round one. Who did he beat? It's escaping me, but a big win for Khachanov. Coric could be a threat. I would say I thought hard about Coric. I thought hard about Tsitsipas. By the way, Sasha Zverev. I know a ton of people have loved to ask me, what's wrong with Zverev? What's wrong with Zverev? And I've talked about the shortcomings with his forehand. But I think it's worth mentioning Zverev has opened up recently and talked a bit about a ton going on off the court with managers and kind of business, with issues on his business end, lawsuits, lawyers, drama off the court for Sasha Zverev. So has he been distracted? Has that taken away from what kind of shape he's in physically? Has that taken away from his ability to focus on the court? Yes, probably all of that is true because he says it is. Are there still issues with his forehand? Yes. So it's not one or the other. It's still going to be both, but it's worth keeping an eye on Sasha Zverev. He says that all of these issues are behind him, so we'll see if that's true or not. Oh, sorry guys, the thing on the bottom is wrong. Zverev versus FAA round 2. That must be leftover from. Was that leftover from Monte Carlo and I didn't change it? Because it'll be Nadal and FAA in round 2. So ignore that graphic for those watching on YouTube. Apologies for that. For now, by the way, Zverev is still upset alert. He He'll be taken off of upset alert once he deserves to be taken off of upset alert. I thought about maybe coming in with an optimistic twist on Zverev for this tournament because, I mean, I actually don't know why I would do that. But I guess because he opened up, he got all this off of his chest, and he said it's behind him. So I thought about giving him the benefit of the doubt. But at the end of the day, uh, conditions like these, Zverev is still he can't mount enough offense. He cannot mount enough offense. So maybe on a slower court, he can beat players with consistency and trading. But on a court like this, I think that a player will be able to bring it to him. I mean, I go back to to matches where he's just generally too passive, and he will lose on fast surfaces that way. He will, because he's no defensive wizard. We'll talk about Christian Garin later in the show. That's a defensive wizard. Zverev is not. That's the difference. Let's go to Nadal's quarter. Now, I made this, by the way, all of these graphics, this was as of last night. Anything that happened today is not taken into account. We've learned more about Rafa Nadal, and he has a brutal stomach virus. Would I still say he comes out of this quarter? I don't know. In the form he's been in, with the mental struggles he's had, doubting his body and his health. Now it's illness. It's nothing really physical beyond illness as far as we know. But Nadal is not a naturally confident person. And it is easy for his confidence to be shaken at this stage, at this point in time. Now, what Nadal has done, before you guys jump on me for that, and you say, oh, how could you say Nadal, one of the most dominant players in the history of tennis, the most dominant clay court player in the history of tennis, has fragile confidence? Well, he has mechanisms to make himself confident. That's why he has all these rituals, because he's transforming himself into the warrior that we know him to be. But when you break down those walls, and when he gets distracted with things like viruses and really, when he struggles and when he's disrupted, when those walls are broken down, well, he can't be the same guy. When his mind starts to wander and he starts to have doubts, that's what's been happening recently. That's why he's not hitting his forehand consistently with the conviction that he needs to. His movement is compromised, yeah, but that's okay if he's slugging every ground stroke. He simply hasn't had the belief that he needs to slug every ground stroke like he was last year. You think his defense was great last year? No, it wasn't. He was still dominating because his forehand was unplayable. It was untouchable. And his backhand was as lethal as it's ever been in his career. That Nadal isn't here right now. And it's not because his defense isn't elite anymore. He can still win without his elite defense. He needs his psyche, though. Nishikori, Medvedev, and Basilashvili are the seeds. Basilashvili lost to Francis Tiafoe, a guy who Tiafoe, his forehand, very loopy, very spinny, but also gets tons of racket head acceleration. But I think that bothered Basilashvili, who likes to hit a lot flatter and likes that kind of fast-paced rhythm. I think Tiafoe's touch, his craft, made Basilashvili very uncomfortable. Tiafoe's ability to change pace, take pace off, hit with more shape, flatten it out, gave Basilashvili no rhythm. So really nice match by Tiafoe. Medvedev also lost to Guido Pella. I called that a bit by making Pella my dark horse before or last night it would have been. So Pella continues the success on clay. In early popcorn, it is Nadal and Auger Aliassime will get it in this round. There are comments about Nadal and Aliassime, so I will talk about that early popcorn match when I read that comment. I am picking Dominic Thiem. I still think he's on top at the moment. thought about Djokovic because, again, I think the faster speeds enable Djokovic to create more offense and not get into the kind of physical battles that he's tended to try to avoid against the players who can match him in consistency, like RBA and Kohlschreiber and Medvedev. So I think the speed helps him. The speed that he'll get at like a Wimbledon or an Australian Open, all of a sudden we could see Djokovic a little bit, or just basically find offense off the ground from behind the baseline easier. And that'll help him immensely. So I thought about Djokovic, but I still think it's a slow progression for him building up to the French Open. I still do. I do think we'll see a good showing from Djokovic. Nadal's got the stomach virus, hasn't been playing well, and also if he's not playing the forehand as aggressive as he needs to, which has been an issue, he'll be taken advantage of in Madrid on these faster courts. And this is traditionally his least favorite clay court on this European clay court stretch. And Federer's just coming back. He probably needs some repetition, and we'll see how he does. It's a pretty big mystery. I've already done my piece on him. Right now, Dominic Thiem to me is the guy. So I'm going with him. I don't think I don't think it's a flash in the pan. I said Tsitsipas won Barcelona earlier in the show, didn't I? Sorry about that, because Thiem won Barcelona. Tsitsipas won, was it Estoril? Look, I gotta be real with you guys. It has been a tough 2 weeks, as you can tell. I think you guys can tell. But there's a light at the end of the tunnel. I mean, this summer, I get pretty freed up, and I don't want to make any promises. I'll talk more in depth at a later date. But there are good things around the corner. So I think Dominic Thiem is my pick. Let's get to the comments. Steven Zhao says, how will Federer's game play on clay? I feel people underestimate his clay game. Most of his runs on clay were just stopped by Rafa, but besides Rafa, he's competed somewhat decent on clay. With that said, what will be his weaknesses on the surface? I feel that a great addition to his game, he has added the ability to hit balls on the rise. Most one-handed players get attacked on that side, for example, Tsitsipas. Every time he plays Rafa, it seems that his backhand is not pulling its weight, and you said Roger has decent fitness, even though lazy observers say he lacks energy. I don't see any weaknesses. Do you feel there's a weakness with his game, or do you feel someone will just simply outplay Roger? Thanks, love the show. Appreciate that, Steven. The reason clay takes away from Federer's game is because it's not as easy for him. He's not the heaviest hitter. That's not how he creates his offense. As an offensive player, Federer simply needs to do more than he would have to do on grass to win each and every point. Federer's bread and butter is to win the point on his terms. Federer wants to take it to you. Federer wants to play attacking tennis. Well, on clay, when the ball just simply loses more speed every time it hits the court, he's not going to get as much out of his first serve. He's not going to get as much out of his forehands off the ground, which means every single time he hits an approach shot, it needs to be that much better. Every time he hits an inside-out forehand that would maybe be a winner on a hard court or a grass court, it needs to be a little bit better, and he needs to hit an extra shot. The list goes on and on. It's simply harder to find offense. And Federer wants to end points on his terms. He needs to make it better on clay. He needs to make it better than he's used to. And that will draw errors. Players will get back neutral, where on other surfaces they wouldn't have. But with that being said, you make a very astute observation, and that is that Roger Federer was the second best clay court player in the world for nearly the entirety of his prime. Because in modern tennis, surface is not a deal breaker, it's a deal changer. And Federer is a great tennis player, which is definitely the most obvious statement I have ever made on this show. But a great tennis player is not just going to stink when they move on it, when they go to another surface, unless they have no clue how to move on it. And Federer grew up on clay. He knows how to move on clay. He's joked around about having to reteach himself how to slide, but Federer knows how to move on clay. The only way a player will go on another surface and absolutely stink is if they don't know how to move on it, like Gill when he goes on grass. And I don't know if that's getting better. Or sometimes, Americans are absolutely lost trying to move on clay. I mean, that's when you'll see surface become a deal breaker. But normally, it's just a deal changer. It either accentuates your strengths, surface either accentuates your strengths or exposes your weaknesses, right? But it will not change. I mean, it's not gonna. The better player, again, it can shrink gaps, but it's not gonna make as big a difference as. When it comes to like Federer in his prime making the French Open final, what did he do it? 5 years? I'm literally guessing, but I think like 5 years in a row he made the French Open final. All right. Next comment, thoughts on Christian Garin. 2 clay court titles this year. Junior French Open champion. Just beat Zverev. Could he be a big player on clay in coming years? So I ball boyed for Christian Garin, actually. So, God, he must have been young. He must have been like 15. I mean, no, not 15. But I think he was in the juniors. So he might have been like 16 years old. And already I was like, whoa, this guy's a physical beast. This guy can move. There's a path to victory in tennis that isn't really thought about a lot. Or I would say it's underappreciated because the best players in the world need to bring a little bit more to the table. But if you play exceptional defense and never miss, you are going to be rewarded for it. With a huge caveat here. A huge caveat. If you're going to play this style, and that is I am not going to miss before you, and you're going to have a lot of trouble hitting it by me. If these are the two ways that you are relying on winning points, you must have better fitness than your opponent pretty much every time you step on the court, or you will guaranteed lose. So a guy like David Ferrer, like his game style for the most part would not have been effective if he had worse fitness than his opponents. But usually when he stepped on the court, he was the more fit player. And a guy like Christian Garin, whose game is predicated around making more balls and playing great defense, he must be the fitter player or he will lose. And that's something that he's understood. He is in better shape than most of his opponents. He is a physical beast. Is there anything else I want to say on that? I mean, when Ferrer went up against Murray and Djokovic and Nadal, he was not the fitter player. He was as fit, but like those guys, their cardio and their movement were always kind of just as good as Ferrer's, their conditioning, their endurance. So Ferrer, where was he going to garner his advantage? He wasn't. Right? He couldn't outlast Andy Murray. Ferrer could outlast almost anyone on tour. Christian Garin is going to outlast most guys on tour. And that's how he's going to win. He's got some weapons. His backhand is a little inconsistent, but he hits it flatter, and he can be aggressive on his backhand. And his forehand is a much longer, very clay court-like swing with a Western grip. And when he has time, he can do damage. But for the most part, you're going to lose to Christian Garin because you're going to make errors. And I watched the final with Berrettini, who has a bigger serve than Garin, who has a bigger forehand than Garin. But Garin retrieved a lot of balls, and Berrettini lost from errors because Garin put a lot of balls in the court. And it was as simple as that. Last one, Nadal versus FAA. Is FAA ready for this? Is he ready for the real Nadal? No. The question is, are we going to get it? But here's the thing about Felix on clay, and he likes the surface. He's a natural clay courter, but the patience just is not there in his shot selection yet. Felix can be beaten with consistency, and I would feel that as long as Nadal is himself, Nadal will beat him on consistency. He will miss a lot less, and it's not as if Auger-Aliassime will be able to push Nadal around the court, because obviously you can win a match and make more errors than your opponent. It's just you better be kind of bullying, you better have most points on your terms. And Nadal's forehand is such a big weapon, Auger-Aliassime will probably not play most points on his terms. He might play a slight majority of the points on his terms, but I think that he's in a position where he can be beaten on flat-out consistency. One more, because I really don't want to ignore this one. Someone said, do you think PEDs are pervasive in tennis? All I'm going to say is this. I'm going to keep it very short, very sweet. It concerns me that not as many players are caught as you would think. I would be less concerned with PEDs in tennis if we saw more suspensions and more players getting caught. How is it that guys, especially in the 150s, looking for an edge, looking for a living, maybe, struggling to make the money that they need, how is it that there aren't more cheaters out there? I don't have enough faith in humanity, unfortunately, to say, well, I guess tennis players are just really great and no one's cheating. Do I get suspicious? Yeah. Do I think it's happening at the very, very top? No. I think that I feel like there is pretty thorough drug testing. The players at the top get drug tested more than the players at the bottom. But I must admit, it makes me suspicious that not a lot of tennis players get busted. That's all I got for this week. Hope you enjoyed. Don't forget to subscribe. I'll see you next time.